Hey, I'm Dr. Pilet, and you know, class one of our anger management program is called Dealing with Intense Emotions. And in that briefing, that first class, I'm going to hit you with some information to hopefully increase your awareness and, if you will, allow some of this information I provide to you that help you to change your life. Number one, I'm going to tell you that anger is an all-time high, dealing with intense emotions is an all-time high, and there's a lot of obvious common sense reasons that would explain that to you, if you will. Stress. You know, stress is anything that's a change in your life. Anything that's a change in your life. So a new job, a new home, birth of a baby, death of a loved one, anything that brings about change is potentially high in stress levels. Now, not all things are equal in the world of stress. You know, being late for work is stressful, but guess what? Being late for work and stuck in traffic is even more stressful. So there's things that happen that exponentially can take an event that's maybe a little stressful and turn it to something that's a lot stressful. One other problem we have in our society today that helps us, you know, again, deal with the emotions of day to day, skyrocketing cost of living. I had a man recently who sold his house, and he was so delighted he sold his house, and he couldn't believe what it was going to cost to rent a house, which was actually 1.5 times his payment for the house he had. And then he had to start driving his children to school, and that just blew him away. That stress, the celebration for making a good sale was quickly followed by the cost of the apartment, the ideas of now I've got to get my kids to school. One of the problems we have, if you will, you know, a lot of us have poor mentoring. We just weren't raised in households where the members of the household dealt well with others. So when we talk about dealing with intense emotions, you know, a lot of times the only exposure I had to someone was, especially when you're a child, them yelling and them screaming, the high reactivity, the way that they project their negative energy. Poor mentoring is obviously one of those things. And there's two more things, of course, that do affect how I personally deal with intense emotions. And one is, of course, mental health issues. You know, I read a study that said at any given time, 30% of our society met the criteria for clinical depression. 30% clinical depression. So just life brings about certain pressures. And then, you know, it may not be your fault, but, you know, we may have moms and dads or relatives that have sustainable mental health issues that are genetically, if you will, genetically introduced. Now, I will tell you, each of us has that responsibility to look at our family tree and see what those potentials are to us. And if you're one of those folks, you got to take the initiative. Got to take the initiative. You know, anger simplified. I've done this professionally for a number of years. 90% of the things you argue about are the same things over and over again. People, topics, situations. They become anchored and locked into a habitual way of thinking. When I'm with this person and this topic comes up, boom. Now the situations that present them are so obvious. Sometimes it's Christmas, New Year's, holiday vacations, weekends, people you work with, but certain situations expose you to people and topics that tend to be repetitive. We get stuck in patterns. You know, the patterns we get stuck in have to do with lifestyle. You know, we work Monday through Friday, so we tend to go out Friday night. We tend to go out to the same place. We have kids, they get picked up at 4:15, 5 o'clock, whatever, and we'll always have to be there to pick them up. Dinner's at the same time. My boss, the chores, the responsibilities of my job, always the same. We get stuck in these patterns. And then finally, if you will, one other major contribution, if it has to do with the experience of intense emotions, it has to do with the high stress of just our lifestyle that we have brought personally to us. I've got a friend of mine, he's an airline pilot, he loves flying, but the truth is living in hotels and not being available for important things because my job requires me to fly to Europe or to be unavailable for those things that sometimes are minor emergencies, but you know, when we hear our child say you're never there, and actually that's not in your heart, but sometimes it's just about the occupation and the lifestyle that we choose. And then finally, I got one last idea about anger simplified, and that is according to current police records here in Tampa, about 80% of all those people arrested typically had some altered state involved. Okay? By the way, having a beer after a hard day is common, but having 2 or 3 beers, now we get into trouble. Okay? Anger simplified, quite simply, I want you to know there's a difference between hostility and aggression. For my purposes of this lecture, hostility is the way that I verbally and non-verbally let you know I'm unhappy. Facial expressions, body language, it's not the words you say, it's how you say the words. Do you love me? Oh, I love you so much. I just praise the day I met you. As opposed to, do you love me? Yeah, I love you. I love you. Can't you tell? And so it's not the words, really. Really, it's how you say the words. Aggression. Now we're talking about throwing things, hitting, punching, slapping. It's a physical act. Now for this lecture, hostility is anything that's not that. Aggression, I'm actual physical contact, I'm throwing things, I'm pitching things. Just for the purposes of this little lecture, just understand what those differences are. When I look at the experience of anger, it can either be state or trait anger. State anger has to do with the way you experience given a interpretation as you're involved in some state. You know, you're at a party, there's your ex-boss, you don't like him, people are drinking. The state that you get into that has to do with that situation. State anger, situational. Trait anger is a little bit different. Trait anger has to do with your personality and temperament type. Extrovert versus introverts. If you take the Myers-Briggs test, you'll find that you tend to be a feeler or a thinker. Businessmen that are hard-nosed about making a profit tend to be thinkers. Yes, I got to let you go. It's not that I won't miss you, but I got to make a profit. Therapists, counselors, moms, dads that are involved with their children on an emotional level, feelers. We make totally different decisions. Sometimes the decision we make doesn't pass the test of facts. I had a man finish one of my anger management programs not long ago, and he has been in an awful, awful relationship, been arrested twice for domestic violence, and as he finished this anger management program that I had, he announced to me and everybody there that he was proud that he had decided to buy a house for his partner and that from now on everything would be fine. And yet I'm going to tell you, I'm not sure about that. That deductive reasoning to buy a house to compensate for the emotions of my partner, that's not so certain. Now, when you talk about trait anger and personalities and temperament, my research has shown that there's some people with high trait anger. And these are people that have impulse control issues. They tend to drink too much. They tend to be highly reactive. Remember, you can respond to a situation by making the decision on what to do, or you react. You know, when we react, we find that the notion that I step back to sort of make a decision about what choice to make is not really very long. We tend to become reactive. We snap. Understand that typically when I have high trait anger people, there is an associated mental health disorder. Depression, anxiety, bipolar, these are all things. Look, don't feel like a victim. It may not be all your fault, but you have to deal with the cards that you've been dealt. And it may very well be that you find yourself in that area of being highly reactive because there's some mental health issues that are going on. Also, when we look at high trait angry people, these are lifelong challenges. They don't just easily go away. And when we talk about treatment goals have to do with you owning what triggers me. What people tend to piss me off. What situations tend to make me high risk. Okay? Important to understand, if you're one of those high trait people, if this becomes personal to you, you got to take care of yourself because you're always high risk for expressing anger at levels that are dysfunctional and inappropriate. The thing I want you to learn most of all here is suppressed, express, or control. Suppressed, expressed, or controlled. I'll start off with suppressed easy. You know, suppressed anger is we tend to hold it in. We tend to not talk a lot. Someone might ask if you're angry. You'll say, no, not me. I'm not angry, when actually you are. Suppressed angry people tend to be passive aggressive. And that is, I'm passive to people for the purpose of pissing them off. I have someone that's calling me, and I'm not going to answer the phone because A, I don't want to talk to them, but B, it really pisses them off. Okay? Suppressed angry people tend to punish those around them covertly. They spread gossip. They tell people things that are sort of undercurrents. They create this notion of a relationship where I tell you about a person in such a way that when someone asks me, did you say that? I'm going to deny it, of course. Suppressed angry people have issues because they tend to act like victims. You tend to ask them how their day was, and they'll tell you everything that's negative and everything that's blue and everything that's awful because they tend to identify with being a victim, okay? When I ask you to talk about expressed angry people, this is real easy. Expressed angry people, they tell you up front, I'm angry at you and this is why. We tend to be at times hostile. You know, this is your fault because you're late, and if you hadn't been so late, I wouldn't be angry with you. But when you go into that idea of expressed angry people, when we start throwing things and pushing and start, you know, grabbing chairs, etc., now we're graduated from hostility to aggression. About 90% of my clients that express their anger are typically hostile. Throwing things, hitting things, putting holes in walls is definitely the minority, okay? People that express high levels of anger listen to collect information to prove you're wrong, but they don't listen. Catch that? They listen to collect information to prove you're wrong. Why? Because they just want to win. Expressed people, they want to win. They want to win arguments. They use direct verbal, hey, you're stupid, you're an idiot, I don't like you, as opposed to indirect, which is the look or how you say the words. Direct, I say it, I put it front. Very single-sided. It's all about me. Has nothing to do with you. And then finally, when you talk to a person that's got that's habitually expressing their anger, they'll always tell you things that justify themselves. You made me angry. This is your fault. When I talk about anger control, that's the third of the three ways. Anger control equal problem solving. If you don't learn anything else but from this lecture, anger control equal problem solving. People tell me all the time, hey, Doc, you'd be so proud of me, I controlled my anger. Yeah, what happened? Well, I was about to scream and yell, and I didn't. I turned my back and walked away. Guys, that's suppressed anger. That's not anger control. Anger control is equal problem solving. I regulate my internal emotions, and I understand the warning signs. I tend to be a collaborator or a compromiser. Later on in one of your classes, you'll have the 6 conflict styles. 2 of them, collaboration or compromise, are healthy. The other 4, agitator, competitor, avoider, accommodator, those aren't good. Those aren't healthy. Understand, when I want to be a controlled, angry person, problem solving, collaboration, or compromise. We focus on problem solving. That's the big thing. Let's focus on how we solve the problem, not worry about who created the problem. When it's an unwinnable situation, they understand it, they identify it, they get out of there. People that are controlled, if you will, always are looking at the bigger picture. You know, I want to enjoy life, I want to get along with you, and sometimes I'll agree with something that, you know, maybe I don't totally agree, but it's no skin off my back, so to speak. We can just move on. And then finally, if you will, controlled angry people, people with controlled anger, they tend to be long-term focused, okay? Understand that this exercise that I taught you today is about understanding risk factors, understanding the 3 types, the 3 styles: express, suppress, or control. Also, as a last point, I'd like to point out to you that you know, a large amount of our emotional energy is nonverbal. My facial expressions, my body language, but also listen to the words that I use. I love you. I love you. I love you. Nonverbal also includes all those voice inflections, the slowness, the speed. You know, so when I ask you to realize that most of our people really don't pay attention to the tone, the volume, the inflection. They know the words they're using, but understand the tone, the volume, the inflection, the pace. Those carry meanings. And then finally the visuals, your facial expressions, your eye contact, your body language. The words make up 4% of the meaning. Only 4%. How you say the words is 37%. And then the visuals, the facial expressions and the body language, that's 54%. So as I'm talking to you, the meaning of what I'm saying to you by words is only 4%. The vast majority of this has to do with how I say the words and how I handle my body language. Now, if you take 4 plus 37 plus 54 and add up, it doesn't come to 100. And the reason is when I did this study, there were other factors that we couldn't identify that do contribute to, your ability to communicate. Sometimes it might have been a plane flying overhead, distractions they have to do with the kids, but they were all there, and we tend to not realize what they are. I've got a question for you as you end this video. Who's angrier? The person who yells and screams or the person who holds it in? Who's angrier? The person who yells and screams or the person who holds it in? Hey, again, this is the first class of the anger management program, lessons 1 through 12. Short version for you to review or whatever. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, I'm Dr. Pilet.